Okay, video 2 of developmental psychology is about infancy and childhood, and we're actually going to cut this portion of the unit in half into 2 videos, so we're not making, excuse me, an incredibly long video. So let's get going. Within the brain, nerve cells form before birth, actually, and after birth, the neural networks that enable us to walk, talk, and remember have a wild growth spurt. So, and this is a picture showing you mapping neural connections in the brain. And this is how many neural connections you have, or this is just a snapshot at birth, and then 3 months, and then 15 months. So you can see you're going through rapid growth, especially neural connection growth in your first couple of months of being alive. From ages 3 to 6, growth occurs most rapidly in the frontal lobes, which enable rational planning. The association areas linked with thinking, memory, and language are the last cortical areas to develop. Maturation is the biological growth processes that enable orderly changes in behavior, and they're relatively uninfluenced by experience. These set the basic course of development, and experience adjusts it. Maturation accounts for commonalities, like from standing before walking to using nouns before adjectives. This is a good example of a newborn's preference for faces. So we know that newborns are, they're innately able to recognize humans, and particularly their mothers. And you can read the little caption down here. And this is another picture that they used when they were testing some infants and their habituation tendencies. But as you can see, if you look hard at this picture, you can see this is a cat's head on a dog's body and a dog's head on a cat's body. But infants didn't seem to know that. As infants' muscles and nervous systems mature, ever more complicated skills emerge. The sequence is universal, and the timing will vary. Babies roll over before they sit unsupported, and they usually creep before they walk, kind of like an army crawl when we say creep. That's what that means. Genes play a major role in this, and identical twins typically begin sitting up and walking on nearly the same day. Experience has limited effect for other physical skills as well, including those that enable bowel and bladder control. The average age of earliest conscious memories is 3.5 years old. But by 4 to 5 years, this infantile amnesia is giving way to remembered experiences. Experiments do show, however, that infants can retain learning over time. For example, 3-month-olds who learn to propel a mobile by moving their legs retain that association for at least a month. And studies of older children indicate that sometimes what the conscious mind cannot recall in words from the earliest years, the nervous system will remember. Cognition refers to all the mental activities that are associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. And Jean Piaget maintained that the mind of the child is not a miniature model of the adults. He theorized that the mind tries to make sense of experiences by forming schemas. And these are concepts or frameworks that organize and interpret information. And then he says that we assimilate new experiences, or in other words, we interpret them in terms of our current understandings. Sometimes we also adjust or accommodate our current understanding to incorporate new information. Jean Piaget is one of the most famous psychologists and researchers that ever lived. And this is a really good example, this picture right here, because it's showing a child reading a book, and he sees a cow, and then he goes to the zoo and he sees a moose and he sees a donkey, and he calls them both cows. This is his schema. He sees a big 4-legged animal and he calls it a cow. But as he grows older, eventually he will assimilate and accommodate that to learn that that's actually a moose and these are actually donkeys. This is a picture of an impossible object that children do not, our brain doesn't work, and we cannot accommodate this. Our brain doesn't work that way. And these are some pictures that researchers took when they were doing some tests on schema and child cognitive development with children. And these are children at this age, particularly between 12 to 24 months, don't have a concept of scale. So these kids were trying to slide down this itty bitty slide, and they were trying to get in this itty bitty car to try, because they don't have a schema for it. They haven't accommodated and assimilated this information yet. During the sensory motor stage, which is birth to age 2 of cognitive development, children experience the world through their senses and through their actions. By about 8 months, an infant is going to exhibit what we call object permanence. And this is awareness that things still exist even when they are out of sight. And you can see this start to develop in infants if you're ever around an infant. For example, if they drop something, before they develop object permanence, they're just going to start crying and freaking out because they don't know where it went. But once they start to develop this object permanence, when they drop it, they're going to look for it. If they drop it right underneath them, they know that. And they can throw something and know that they threw it in a certain direction and they can chase it. That's object permanence. And this little girl is showing object permanence right here. She's got a little lamb. She puts a blanket over it, and then she holds it up, and yay, she's got it. Infants can discriminate between possible and impossible objects. After habituating to the stimulus right here, a 4-month-old stared longer if they were shown the impossible version of the cube right here, because they're trying to figure it out. And this is another example of object permanence, kind of baby math. 5-month-old infants will stare longer at the impossible outcome. Piaget maintained that up to about 6 or 7 years old, children are in what we call a pre-operational stage, and they're too young to perform mental operations. They just simply don't have the capacity to do it. They are egocentric, which means that, and that's on the next slide, but they can't perceive things from another point of view, and they lack a theory of mind. And we're going to talk about that again in just a second. Again, at about age 6 or 7, they're going to become capable of performing concrete operations, and those concrete operations are required to be able to comprehend the principle of conservation. And conservation is this principle that properties like mass, volume, and number remain the same despite changes in the forms of objects. So watch these pictures. You see 2 glasses of milk right here sitting in front of this girl. She looks about 4 or 5 years old. And then they have a tall, skinny glass. They pick up one of these glasses of milk and put it in the tall, skinny glass, and she says that there's more in this tall, skinny glass. Obviously, we know it's the exact same amount, it's just a different shaped glass, but she doesn't see that. She can't see that. She's in the pre-operational stage of conservation. This is a video that I took. This is my niece, Carlin, and this is a video that I took last night, actually, at Moe's, and this is another example of pre-operational thought. Okay, close your eyes. Can I see you? No, I can't? Okay, you can open your eyes. So that's just a good example. She closed her eyes and I asked her if I could see her, and she said no, even though I didn't have my eyes closed. She was the only one who had her eyes closed. And that's an example of pre-operational stages. And I have some more videos of her. She likes for me to experiment on her. She thinks it's fun. So I have some more videos that I'll show you in class of things that she does. But egocentricism, again, means that children in the pre-operational stage can't see something from another person's point of view. Miss Bamonti across the hall told me one time that her daughter was looking out the window when they were driving in the car at night, and she was like, "Mommy, the moon is following me." And so she honestly thought that the moon was following her instead of, she didn't realize that there's this whole universe and it doesn't revolve around her. She honestly believed that it does revolve around her. And that's very typical of children that age. When children are egocentric, they can't perceive these things from another point of view, and they lack a theory of mind. And a theory of mind is a people's idea about their own and others' mental states, about their feelings, perceptions, and thoughts, and the behaviors that these might predict. And a really important person that worked with this theory of mind was Lev Vygotsky, and he complimented Piaget's emphasis on how the child's mind grows through interaction with the physical environment. And he emphasized how the child's mind grows through interaction with the social environment. He noted that children internalize their culture's language and they rely on inner speech making them increasingly capable of thinking in words and using words to work out solutions to problems. So the next stage is concrete operational. And this is Piaget's theory of the stage of cognitive development. And this is about 6 or 7 years old to about 11 years old, during which children gain the mental operations that are going to enable them to think logically about concrete events. So you're beginning to develop the logical part of your brain. Your left frontal lobe is really starting to kick in here from between 7 and 11. When you're in this stage, you can think logically about concrete events, you can grasp concrete analogies, and you can comprehend mathematical transformations. And then the stage that we are all in is formal operational. By age 12, reasoning is going to expand from the purely concrete to encompass abstract thinking, and again, this is called formal operational. So you can think logically about abstract concepts. And this is a really good chart that's going to show you the stages of cognitive development, and we're going to talk about these today and do some more activities with them. But I really encourage you to pause, screenshot this, get it down in your notes, whatever you need to do. So let's reflect on Piaget's theory. Today's researchers have shown that young children are more capable and their development more continuous than Piaget believed. Piaget's stages are very, very rigid. The cognitive abilities that emerge at each stage have begun developing at earlier ages, and today researchers also see formal logic as a smaller part of cognition than Piaget did. But nonetheless, studies support his idea that human cognition unfolds basically in the sequence that he proposed. So you see, it is a very influential theory, but we do know that development is more continuous than what Piaget had first theorized. We have a larger emphasis on social factors again. And then Vygotsky, Lev Vygotsky, he's not as famous as he is in other parts of the world here in America, but he did a lot of influential work. And one of his things that he did was the zone, he talked about the zone of proximal development. And this was the zone between what children could learn with and without help. And he said that effective mentoring occurs when children are developmentally ready to learn a new skill. So this zone of proximal development is the time period in which children can learn with or without help. Briefly, we're going to talk about autism. Autism is a developmental disorder that appears in childhood and is marked by a deficit in communication skills, social interaction skills, and the understanding of other states of mind. Autism is an incredibly complicated disorder in which, and we call it a spectrum disorder. Some people can have autism and still function pretty highly in the world. Other people who have autism are incredibly dependent and they need a lot of help, and we're going to do some more activities with this. But autism is marked by an impaired ability to infer other people's mental states. And this is important in childhood development because now in America, 1 in every 100, and I believe in 125 babies born in America are now on the autism spectrum. So it is very important to discuss this. This is a picture. A research team at Cambridge University's Autism Research Center introduced children with autism to emotions experienced and displayed by these toy trains right here. And after about 4 weeks of viewing the animations, the children displayed a markedly increased ability to recognize emotions in human as well as the toy faces. So what this told the researchers two things: that autistic children, their brains don't function like ours. They have a hard time. They cannot innately see people's emotions the way that we can see them. They can't read facial expressions and social cues and sarcasm, things like that. However, this study did tell the researchers also that autistic children can learn these skills. It's much more difficult for them. It's very time consuming. It requires a lot of patience, but they can learn these social cues and social skills. So that's it for today. Thanks, guys.